Welcome, everybody, and thanks so much for coming here today. I know many of you I may know or have had, and there's many new people here today. The presentation that I'm about to give you, I've done a lot of versions of this around the world, and the most important thing about this presentation is that it is provocative for you. And I hope that you start thinking about things that perhaps you haven't thought about, that are looking at information that you haven't seen before as a result of the research that we do, of the relationships that we have with industry around the world. And certainly we will have time available for you to ask questions and collaborate with us. So step back, let's get ready here and talk about what is this all about. Now, another very important piece of where I'm coming from today is that, what is creating this future of work? What is causing it to happen? And from my perspective, it starts with the digital disruption factors. It's all about the technology. It's about digital transformation, disrupting the way we're doing things. And another piece, and again, those of you that know me, I will add on another important factor. Not only is digital technology creating this change, it is also accelerating that change. And this is what sets it apart, all right, from a lot of the things that have happened over the past centuries. And we're going to see that is affecting everything. But let me be clear that as the digital changes occur, so too much will work, future of work. So one is dependent on the changes of the other. And two parts of that is that one, technology is making it possible, and two, there's a very real economic benefit to it. So let's go forward, save up your questions. We'll be able to go through them. So the first thing that comes up that everybody is really challenged with is, how do you design a digital-based organization? All right? Why are these other companies, the Amazon, Salesforce, let me go on and on and on, Google and Apple and all the rest, why are they doing so well? And other companies are essentially struggling in the area of work and performance. So the first thing that we look at, particularly brought on by COVID, look, COVID is another accelerating factor, but right now we're seeing employees on the move. 25% employees are now considering or planning to move more than 50 miles from their core office, on top of the 12% that have already done so. Now, COVID was a part of this, but it doesn't work without technology, right? And as we'll see, as they've experienced this, we've realized that it does work. It can happen. Paid time off is becoming a factor. The digital organizations now have more dedicated time for their employees to upskill or volunteer, willing to give up future earnings in many ways to capture more market share and to retain this talent. And ask yourself today, in the organizations that you are in some of these particular areas, is this what your company is doing or not doing? Skills and in employees, the lessons that we've really learned is adaptability and ability to learn and apply new skills quickly. I've coined something, is what most companies really want is immediate fit. Immediate fit. Remember this. All right. So it's can you really get the employee that has all the skills? Well, things are changing so quickly. So how do you upskill them quickly to get engaged in these things? And what are the predictable factors of that? And then, of course, one of the real dilemmas that we're experiencing now is how important women are in the workplace, all right, and in the workforce. And recently, they're the high dropping out to pursue many other things. But 3 million women have dropped out of the workforce. They are dominating that trend right now, and we'll be able to take a look a little bit more as to why. So the whole issue here is, how do we respond? And the response is, if these things are occurring and changing, what is your organization doing to ensure that you can attract the best talent? Business leaders, as we know, will need to understand what employees really want, all right, and plan to allow more flexibility and personalization. Support mutual health, make it possible to come back to the workforce in many, many different ways. That's what we're going to be exploring today. And if you think it's going to happen way in the future, no, because the future is being accelerated. Keep that in mind as we go forward. All right? So I hope I got your attention. Now let's look at some stats from PricewaterhouseCoopers. 12% of the workforce right now is considering and planning to move more than 50 miles away for a host of reasons, right? The problems in the cities. You know, before COVID, the predictions were that 76% of the world population would be living in mega cities by 2026. Forget that. I mean, that's just not going to happen. 10% are considering moving away temporarily. 7% have already moved away temporarily, and 5% are saying, I'm never coming back. All right? And as we're going to see, these are very critical issues as we start coming out of COVID as to who is going to be coming back to work or not, and in what ways. So we're calling this post-COVID, post-pandemic workforce. And it's very important because the predictions scientifically is that COVID is just one episode of many to expect and to come. Companies face large and growing skill deficits. And there's a host of reasons why we will understand that as we go forward. All right? All of this being driven by changes in technology and demands on technology skills. There's a need for creative solutions. 69% engage in more skill-building activities than ever before. And, you know, in the 80s, we forgot about that as companies. We began to stop investing in our employees. In fact, we see this at the university with so many students who are paying for their own education. I think you're going to start seeing some changes in that area. The previous focus was always for productivity. How can we make our people more productivity, and how do we measure that type of thing? But the current focus is changing rapidly, right? It's more about creativity, rewarding performance, optimizing workforce strategies, becoming more people-centric with policies, more dynamic. In other words, we're going back to human, and people want to be treated as individuals. Everybody wants to be treated as an individual. Something I've spoken to before, we're seeing that in the consumer revolution. And of course, the coming of DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion are so important. There are incredible pressures on DE&I that include more diversity at board representations, more diversity in executive leadership, general management, and certainly the whole issue of STEM jobs, right? The need for science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing, and all these other things to come into this area. And then on top of that, many of you may or may not be aware of what's going on in what we're calling ESG, the environment, social, and governance. And those that are not aware of it is all of the investor rating systems, right? The Vanguards and others are now rating companies based on what we would call non-monetary or non-financial factors as part of the analysis to identify material risks and growing opportunities. They're looking at the ethical status of business sustainability. They're looking at social concerns of their investors and how companies are structured to govern compliance. This has never been done this way before. We're seeing situations where before CEOs are hired, board members are assigned, decisions are made that they have to check with the rating companies to ensure that these decisions will not affect their investability, particularly in public companies. For example, women in the workforce, as I mentioned before, a 1.5 more have more home responsibilities, have more mental health issues than men. They're going to want to rate that, all right, about what these companies are doing to assist in this area. Climate change issues coming in, and certainly in the social area, DE&I is very, very important in affecting this. Future of work is really the future of hybrid work, all right? So let's take a look at this. Majority of executives agree that hybrid is here to stay. There is no clear-cut understanding of the ratios. We just don't know yet, but McKinsey predicts that companies will range from 21 to 80% of on-site requirements. We see some companies that are saying we want you in all the time and are taking a tough stance. I will tell you, hot off the press, as of January 2022, Amazon is requiring 3 days a week. So there are decisions that are being made. How long those decisions will be turned into long-term plans, we just don't know. Other executives may make it a choice of the direct manager to determine that balance. You're responsible, whether your person is there or not, is more a direct line management responsibility. So we're also seeing changes in hiring practices, expansion and recruiting beyond the specific geographies. Now, this is an incredible thing that has occurred. How did it occur? Digital technologies, right? The fact that someone doesn't have to be within a geographic area to work for you. So this is expanding the reach of how people are hired and how they work in companies. 40% of companies already have begun to redesign their hiring practices because of this. Human capital must be seen as a platform. Now, what does that mean? Everybody's talking about being a platform company. Amazon is a platform company. Microsoft is a platform company. All of these companies now are moving in this direction. Some have failed, like GE, and are trying to come back. While each platform stands on its own, a digital platform allows them to be dynamically interact to respond to client or consumer needs. I want you to think about a platform like Lego parts, all right, where you buy Lego parts and retrofit them to create new things, to create new opportunities. Lego used to sell their parts for someone to pick up a set and that set would create something. It would create a truck or a boat. Well, when you go into Lego now, you could just buy a bag of parts. And it's important for those parts to be retrofitted in different ways. And I'll give you some examples of that. But let's look at perhaps as human capital as a platform, not as, created interactively in such a way that the product can only do one thing. So a platform example of human capital is employee skills. What are their certificates? What are their degrees? What are their professional licenses? What are their organization affiliations? What awards have they won? And let's be honest here, when I'm talking about a platform, I'm talking about an automated platform, an AI platform. And we all know that if I really asked you a question in most of your companies, can you give me a report in 25 seconds or 25 minutes of all of the people that have this, and that it isn't quite available in a way that can be retrofitted in other things because they're eclectically part of some other process that is going on. The next one is work experience as a platform. What expertise do you have? What years of experience do your people have? Work history, professional accomplishments, in such a way that if I have a need in my organization, I can immediately go into this digital equivalent and say, hey, do we have anybody that has this many years of experience with these degrees, with these affiliations? And quite frankly, in most companies, it isn't that dynamic. Let's keep going. What about culture capital? What are our day-to-day interactions? What is our diversity? What is our unique personal assets that we have in our organization? You know, we've tried through the Senate of Columbia University to do this many times, but there is no dynamic way right now to search for these kinds of things across all of our professoriates, all right, to really be able to pull in what expertise people really have. Next is, what is your brand? What reputations does your company enjoy? What name recognitions do you have? What ratings do you have? What is your performance and what industries do you affect? And how dynamic is it to get that information? Now, cohesive automated platforms, all right, can only be achieved by something called digital twins, which means the work that's being done manually can be done through what we call hyper automations, right? Using technologies to drive these kinds of things. Now, you've seen some of this, right? You get on Amazon and other intelligent websites, and they are capturing this data and reminding you of various things. Ask yourself, if you're going to compete in the future of work, do you have those 4 platforms? And can they be retrofitted in different parts of your organization to determine the kind of employees that you have? All right. What is your human capital? What can it do? And how dynamic that is. I must tell you, what we're seeing in the non-digital companies, it is painful and difficult to find out that information. Let's keep going. So the future of work is about the innovations that are coming out that are going to change and have changed the rules of the game. So look at this chart right now. There are 4 things that every company should be doing every day. One is, how do we find talent? You can't wait for the talent to come to you. Very few organizations will have that privilege. And the talent that you have, how do you retain it? And how do you deal with turnover of talent? I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Maybe turnover is not such a bad thing. How can you forecast the talent needs that you don't even have? And in from there will be, of course, risk factors. And then how do you develop the talent that you have? So ask yourself, how do those 4 things work? And what's in the middle? Digital hyperautomation. You cannot do this without having the right AI systems, machine language systems, and how does that get configured into your strategy? So let's take each one of these and take a look at what I'm talking about. Finding talent. Skill shortages are not going away. They will continue. Shortages are a global issue. Everybody I talk to has them. Traditional methods are failing and do not scale. Now, we all know today that successful organizations, most of them, will have to be global. And digital is allowing them to do that. DE&I are key components in all markets. And colleges and universities are not going to be a solution in the long run for many of these needs. They will solve a number of them, but everyone is looking at alternative sources of talent. And whether the traditional student coming out of 4 years of college or an MBA or whatever it might be, that is not going to solve all of the challenges. We now know this. Digital technologies and data science applications are critical to everything that I'm talking about here. And as those capabilities change and increase and become more powerful, The way you find talent has to be leveraged off of that. They're the driver. The talent piece is you have to respond to those capabilities. Talent is a platform. It's not a product. It has to be embedded in all of these interchangeable parts that you have in your company. I'm going through this right now with organizations that I'm working with and one that I run. Trust me, it is difficult and painful, and we certainly saw what happened to GE when they tried to do it, among others. Employment, in general, needs to be redefined. Forgetting about the legal aspect of it, what an employee is has to fundamentally change. Organizations must redesign their structure to be more platform-based in the way they find people, what they do with them. And right now, most companies have a need, and then they go to find the talent. That isn't going to work. All right? I think you're going to see more trends of candidate-based decision-making. I'll get back to that a little bit more later. Just a few things for you to think about. Now, how do we retain, and what do I mean by planned turnover of talent? Very important. Let's make some assumptions here. Companies are struggling to keep their talent, particularly in STEM-related fields, right? You go into places like cyber, and they're losing people as fast as they're hiring. Compensation, time off, work-life balance are critical factors in how you retain that talent. Firms must become more intrapreneurial, not entrepreneurial, but intrapreneurial, allowing employees to be creative. This cannot be done by mandates only from the top of the organization. They have to become part of your culture. And to become part of your culture, it has to be part of line managers. Let me define line managers for you. All right? It isn't a title. It's responsibility. A line manager is anybody that's responsible for a day-to-day outcome. They're responsible for getting widgets out at the end of the day. And they become the culture. So in an institution of higher education, who is the culture? It is the day-to-day administrators and the faculty, right? Because we run the place. And if we're not convinced, it doesn't change. Departments must learn how to better support DEI and integrate it across all departments and levels. Now, I'm going to talk to you about diversity, not because we want to comply. We're going to talk about DE&I because it is fundamental to the talent needs you have, and it will be representative of your consumers. Successor planning does not work. I know this may shatter you. I know that I've been hearing about this for years. I went through it. All right? It doesn't work. I was at the Super Bowl with Verizon. I was at Super Bowl 50 doing a keynote. All right? I was sitting next to the chairman, all right, of Verizon, who sponsored this. Next to him was his successor. Guess what happened when it came time for him to retire? The successor doesn't get it. It may be the successor, but it doesn't, you really can't count on it because you never know what the conditions and need are for leadership at the time that it occurs. We've really got to get over that. There is nothing wrong with short-term employee relationship and planned and purposeful turnover. What does that mean? Maybe there's nothing wrong with somebody leaving. Maybe those things can be planned. What hurts most of us is when someone leaves unexpectedly. We see this in very interesting areas, like call centers, right? Everybody's involved with call centers these days, and it is a difficult job. When people leave, often they don't show up the next day. And I've been talking to companies about bringing employees in where they only do this for a period of time, and you have to give them outreach to either leave or go to another job within your company. What is the value proposition? And I am amazed at how companies are failing to do this. Now, everybody wants to automate call centers. And if any of you have ever dealt with a call center, which is all of you, you know it's not working so well, not yet. These are creative ways to change the very fabric of how we retain people for long-term and short-term periods of time. Use analytics to understand what employees need to grow, all right, as opposed to counseling them out all the time, all right? Very often AI is used to determine what we think people will be successful at, and very often we don't select the people that fall outside of the norm. You know, like my friend Albert Einstein, who fell out of the norm and he only changed the world. So you've got to consider these things very carefully. Now, forecasting talent needs, assumptions. Short and long-term forecasting must have increased budgets. You can't do this by saving money. If you're going to try to spend less, you will get less. Example, we knew IoT, Internet of Things, was coming. We knew 5G. Where was the surprise here? All right? Did we not know there would be a shortage of cyber talent? I'm amazed when I talk to cyber CISOs, cyber information security officers, and they say, I can't find people. I said, well, how long you been looking? They say 3 years. I said, 3 years, I could have taken a bunch of young people and trained them and got them on there. Maybe it's a transitional effect. These are some of the things that simply must happen. You have to reevaluate your work policies. You have to sense opportunity and allowing for a response. Many of you who know me know my feeling about planning. I know it makes you feel good to say you're planning. I know your companies want to make you plan. I know Columbia wants to make me plan, but you can't plan. Things are changing so fast that you have to sense opportunities and respond to them. If someone's asking you for a 3-year budget, I don't know anymore. How many of you knew where you were going to be today 3 years ago, 2 years ago? The world is just, as I mentioned, accelerating in change. What is your turnover rate? Rethink existing traditional roles and titles. For example, the digital companies have this thing called customer success managers. It's an awesome thing. Their job is to make sure their clients are happy. Use AI models and machine learning to predict consumer demands, and you will have risk, and you will have failure rate, okay? Just like a baseball player that doesn't get a hit every time he gets to the plate, all right? The net result of that is it's going to cost more money. And if you don't have the money, you better find it. Employ, intern, younger talent. Go deeper, as I have, into underserved areas. They are less likely to leave. They have more complex family structures. Build them. Change the supply chain. Maybe they don't go away to college right away. Maybe they do it part-time with you. All of these things have to be creatively invested in. Employ those that represent your demographic areas. Porter, not Art Langer, but Porter from Harvard said and published, companies that do not have representation from their local communities will struggle. How do you develop talent? Assumptions. There is not enough qualified support anyway. Supply. Everybody's out of supply. All right? Amazon can't find enough people. You need to seek new populations and create a farm system using creative new designs. Companies are miserable at their ability. They've underinvested in talent. Bottom line, right? You must promote boldly. Story that I've told many of you. Very good friend of mine, had a daughter, went to USC, went on to PricewaterhouseCoopers for a couple of years, decided to go for her MBA, made Northwestern, goes to Northwestern. After completing the first year, gets an internship with Amazon. All right? And the whole idea, as you know, in the 2-year MBA program is to get that job from the internship. She gets the job. She goes to Amazon upon graduation, and what is her first job? They give her the entire watch business. Would your company do that? and she's been successful, and she's already on her third or fourth type of job. We've lost that in America. When I came up through Coopers and Lybrand, every 2 years I had another job in Coopers and Lybrand to build that. All right? But they are willing to take the risks. And of course, in those cases, you have to fail fast. Establish more concrete growth possibilities. Tell people what their options are. Don't be vague. Younger employees develop faster than experienced staff. There's no question about it. The simple reason, they have more digital means of growth. So the whole area of mixing millennials and Gen Zs, let me ask you a question. Who are the Gen Zs? They came to Columbia last year as freshmen. In 3 more years, they're going to be at your doorstep. What's your plan? What do you know about them? What are the risk factors? They learn fast because they use digital capabilities. And they're going to expect it from you. And if you don't provide it, they're not going to work for you. Design mentor programs that work. Most of these mentor programs are haphazard. All right? They're really not formal enough. All right? And there isn't enough measurements that go into the successes of the mentors themselves in these organizations. And are they really mentors? Go back to development programs that provide for different roles and responsibilities for defined periods. All right? Quite frankly, a lot of corporations didn't want to do that anymore. They better start, all right? Or they're going to continue to have trouble. Establish gig relationships and outsource to hire arrangements. Gig, right? All different types of employees, consultants, outsource firms that you use that can develop that talent for you with opportunities to hire them away. That's what I'm doing in Workforce, all right, a charity. It's working really great. We've created that farm system for organizations. And it's a try before you buy. And by the time they hire, guess what? 90% retention. These are just some of the things that companies have to start investing in. So how do you lead in the digital world? Notes for the slides. Technology-based perspective of leadership. Forcing obsolescence of past leadership ideologies. Listen to me. Listen to me. This is very, very important. I told you that technology is affecting everything. It's also affecting leadership methodologies. Technology demands changes in work processes, organizational structures, number of full-time employees that you may or may not want, knowledge needs, and there'll be an event on information knowledge management down the road here. What and how work is actually done. What skills are needed. What are your organizational values for work? How do you determine it? Is it really the number of hours that you work? All of that means that the meaning of how a company functions and designed is changing profoundly. And that's why the digital companies, I mean, they're crushing everything, right? Right? I was brought up in the world where you got to be vertical. Amazon has crushed that. It's horizontal. It's getting into many businesses. And in order to get into many businesses with consumer changes, you have to have the platforms, the Lego parts that dynamically link together. Listen, I wish I had more time. All right? I can't cover everything. But there's a lot here. So what are the leadership changes and how does that relate to the S-curve? And I know some of you may have just accidentally forgotten what the S-curve was. All right? The S-curve is an economic indicator. It's not an Art Langer theory. It's an economic one. Everybody agrees to it. The Y-axis on the S-curve is the life cycle of any product or service. If you're down here, the market is uncertain. It requires risk-taking. You capture the market share and you win. That's the Amazon model. But the S-curve tells us that when you get to the middle of the S, you will get competition. Demand and supply will equal out. Prices will begin to drop. And then eventually you will become a commodity up here. And when you're a commodity, either you create new features and functions and create a new S-curve, or you dump the product in a commodity base and you launch something new. That's what IBM did, right? When the PCs became a commodity, what did they do? They sold it. So let's now take a trip down memory lane, Art Langer's memory lane, of how leadership has changed based on technological advances that have happened over the years. So in the 19th century, the leadership model lasted for 70 years of the way you manage things. All the books, all the methods, but at the turn of the century, all right, the turn of the century, right, 1900s, all right, time and motion, productivity, assembly lines, for 50 years basically changed the assumption of how we would lead and become successful as organizations. That only lasted 50 years. So the first one was 70, now we're 50s, but by 1950, it was authoritarian leadership, right? From the 50s to the 80s, managers generating authoritative things, hard work, no goofing off, 30 years of that. Then what happens is in the 1980s, we go from a farm industry to industrialization in a new way. It's the manager as an influencer. It's out-of-the-box thinkers. It's the beginning of technology taking over. All right? By 1990, whoops, what happened here? We went from 30 years to 10 years. All right? Scaled output, dismantle hierarchies, team-driven automations, right? Leadership change. Get rid of the middle managers. They're a problem. Executives have to be closer. Flatten your organization now. Remember all of that stuff? And then by 2000, it's the manager is king, the beginning of science and analytics and Gantt charts and quality production and time and motion, right? And now, by 2010, it's all about the digital era, and we're changing the very definitions of leadership. What I'm telling you is the change in leadership is accelerating. So what is the current digital-based trends in leadership? Help employees grow. Give credit for accomplishments, not at the end of the year, at the end of the day. Provide criticism where it is needed. How many of you have had reviews and said, I didn't know that? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Establish an atmosphere of respect and open conversation. The days of yelling and screaming and bullying that I went through, all right, they're over. And for good reasons. Self-starting culture, that entrepreneurial, intrapreneurial thing that I talked to you about. Inspiring creativity and intrapreneurial thinking and out-of-the-box thinking. This is now being coined the digital technology epoch. What are the principles here? Reduce or eliminate the value of elite skills of individuals or groups. Now, some of you, listen to me. This is like really, really important. The coming of AI and ML is changing the way people get ready to take on new and more complex jobs. They're augmenting the capabilities of less skilled people, enabling them to perform at those tasks because they have an AI machine next to them. It's Star Trek. Tell me, computer, what is the best decision? What things should I consider? We used to relate that to experience. This enables and requires work to be distributed over time and geography. Work is more thought-driven via digital models that a less experienced person can actually utilize in the workplace. That creates new needs that are not predictable ones, all right? Things that they didn't think about. It exposes organizations and it forces transparency because everything is known. Interact and affect an organization's external environment. The person and their environment keeps changing. The P and the E. What's happening is technology is changing the environment, and people are struggling to become evenly based with what the environments are requiring. You've seen old people try to use a smartphone, right? This is what's happening out there. And you have a younger generation that has a lot of knowledge and the environments are not changing. So E is affecting P, and P is affecting E, and they're affecting each other, and it's driving everybody crazy. Because you know what? There has never been a research article that says that companies and organizations like change. So what you have here is this massive change-ready need to what has historically been, I don't want to change. This is Lewin's theory, all right, on how to transform cultures. So business culture is a function of a person in their environment. Behavior is a function of P&E. This is what I've been telling you. Digital transformation, okay, requires a continual reconstruction of the consumer's experience. Do you see what I'm trying to tell you? This P&E, this new consumer that's coming to you in 3 years, this new worker, what do you know about them? What risks are you going to take? How does that transform your workplace? And if you don't know that, you're in trouble, because it's going to change over the next 3 years, and you're not going to plan for it. You're going to respond to it. You're going to sense it and respond to it dynamically. And if you don't have people that can do that, you're going to have a problem. And you know what? It's going to cost money. We have a remote work revolution. Staggering financial and social benefits, right? Commute times have disappeared in many ways. Operational costs have been lowered. Travel budgets are becoming unnecessary. Hiring and retaining talent without location consideration. Lower office real estate costs. Societal divide. What do we do with the underserved locations? Untapped labor talent. I put here WOS. I won't have time to cover it. That's Workforce Opportunity Services. This is what we're doing. We're going to underserved neighborhoods and finding incredible talent and nurturing that and providing it to companies with 90% retention. I wish we had more time. We don't. Gender gaps, particularly women regarding maternity leaves. Look, this is really being exposed. All right? There are women, as we now know, has incredible impact if they're not in the workplace. We need them to be in the workplace, and we need to provide certain things for their particular needs. Gas emission decline impacting environmental sustainability. Well, it's back now, right? But during the COVID transition, we realized that that period, relatively short period, really positively affected the environment. Unbelievable. So what is the future of work? Remote working, common issues and challenges, technology at the core. Specific days off, on-site versus off-site in choice. You're going to have to deal with that. What levels and or jobs have choices? In other words, are you allowed to work from home? Are you not allowed to work from home based on your position? How do we measure performance and productivity? Can we scale this? What will office space look like in the future? Are there differences in compensation if you work from home and don't work from home? What is the design of virtual offices? Most people argue that some form of face-to-face is necessary, that we are social animals and we need that. What about remote management training? What about the manager as being the approval of this, pushing it down like companies like Amazon are doing? Work from anywhere up to 4 weeks per year. We see digital companies providing these things. Need for more innovation. The concept of working appropriately as opposed to just putting in the hours and maintaining a company culture that is going to change. Now, I mentioned to you this whole idea of a T-prime. You know the T-prime thing. It looks like this. Remember I said to you that the depth of skill creates the breadth of understanding for our leaders? Well, guess what? That bottom part of the T is getting smaller and smaller because I can get that wisdom through digital means in a VUCA world. You know VUCA, the world is volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. This allows people to step into management positions faster because you can augment their lack of depth of skill with automation capabilities. So the question becomes, will there be a shift from years of experience to the ability to access, interpret, and contextualize insights provided by machines? This is why younger people tend to learn faster. We are moving from a concept of viewing scientific principles to an accentuating what is uniquely human. This is by Michael Canning from Duke University doing some groundbreaking work. So what is Leadership 2.0, as I'm calling it? Seek opportunities to train your own thinking and develop broader or horizontal perspectives in a platform mindset. Think in terms of what-if scenarios and simulate them. No longer think linearly. Companies that are on a linear trajectory are struggling. Have access today and accelerate its transformation into knowledge. You must use data. Distributed leadership across a network. If you don't do that, you'll never scale. Clarify the strategy of moving towards a platform. I'm going through this right now. You've got to clarify this for your people. You have to give them examples. They will be confused, which is why so many companies are struggling in this area. So this is a question of new leadership. Do you manage for productivity or do you lead for creativity? Are you rewarding for the effort and results or thinking that people are doing and capable of doing? How do you define creativity? A little quote here. The ability to look past received wisdom and traditional approaches to give form or structure to new ideas. New ideas and imagination, as we have as an institute at Columbia. If those stop, you will fail. You can see the computer age everywhere, but in the productivity statistics. That's from a 1987 Nobel laureate, Robert Solow. So leadership values in a digital epoch. Unique principles and non-negotiables. There's a famous story about what we call the Bezos rant, in which he got angry. And he says, look, all of you've got to come along, and if you don't, you have to go. And it worked. You can say things matters. How you say things matters. Your passion. Do you think I'm passionate? Think about that. Are you passionate in however you deliver that? It's not what should you do. It's what could you do. Look at these great inventors that are going on. Focus on integrating different dimensions in your platforms of what consumers want and will want, and take risks. If we look at it here, the digital epoch leader looks at the social issues and responsibilities, the individual, everybody, the consumer revolution, as I call it, the organizational impacts, and how we network, how we go across, how we become more supply chain oriented. And then I'll leave you with this. The future of work is about non-traditional relationships of employment. Look at these 10 different things, and are you doing them? I know you have full-time staff, but what about co-employment? What's wrong with that? Is it really a bad thing? What about gigs, part-time work, consultants, managed services, location services and retainers for certain parts of the years, internships that are much broader and more productive, community relations as I'm doing, and of course, partnerships with other organizations and sharing of employees. All right. Other than that, I have no opinion of anything. All right. And open it up for Q&A.
So, Dr. Leonard, if experience is not as valued because of AI and ML tools becoming more important, how do you leverage people as a platform if there is more automation of thinking as well as tasks?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't go to the other end. I'm not saying experience doesn't matter. I'm saying that you can educate people to take on higher tasks faster in a digital world. And you will see clearly what you're seeing right now is certain jobs will become obsolete. Call centers eventually will become obsolete. But no revolution has ever gotten rid of jobs. The whole problem that we're learning today is we're struggling with shifting people to new jobs. There are more jobs than ever before, but some jobs will become obsolete, just like they did in the Industrial Revolution. The difference is the Industrial Revolution took 80 years to really take effect. This is happening so much faster. So don't discard experience. Don't think that if you don't have it, it's just reliance on data more and being able to do so much more because we can manage that through the aid of machines. But it's going to create a lot more jobs. Look, Goldman Sachs figured this out. They've already stated years ago that they are a technology firm. And 1/3 of their employees are technology people, but they're not the traditional IT people that we know. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Dr. Lionel. So another interesting question. What role does political leadership play?
Politics is not going away anytime soon. Now, if those of you that have taken a course with us in tech management called Strategic Advocacy that is taught by Lyle Yorks, Professor Lyle Yorks, is that, there's two parts to politics, right? It's like there's good politics and there's bad politics. We're not talking about bad politics here, right? Bad politics is destructive. It's like when you go for that hot heart measurement where you have a certain measurement that gives you the good measurement versus the bad one. Good politics is influence, change through influence. That doesn't change, but it has some issues, right? We know that how you influence and speak to people in a virtual world is different. Where is the balance of face-to-face? We're finding clearly that face-to-face is not going away. The balance of it is just different. But leaders have to know how to lead in a virtual world and face-to-face, and what are the balances of those as we go forward.
Thank you. So let's see. How do you recommend training managers about the platform mentality? Are there any resources you would recommend using?
Well, there's all kinds of products out there that are coming out. There's all kinds of consultants that are running around. Be careful, all right? And then, of course, there are education programs. For example, and I'm not selling here, but we just launched out of Teachers College the Workforce Education and Development Program for HR people that includes building these kinds of new types of events. It requires good leadership. Trust me, there are many managers in your company that can't wait to sink into this and do it.
Okay, so we seem to have been, but there's lots of questions here, so I just want to make sure we cover them all. What positions are in higher risk of automation, and what skills will be needed for the future of work that are in short supply now?
Well, right now, what you need is more digital managers. You need more people who understand life cycles. You have to have more people that understand robotics and how to manage these types of things. Industrial automation is in trouble. I'm spending a tremendous amount of time in the shortage of skills. Do you know that there's a massive shortage of welders in the world right now? I'm working with a lot of companies, but each of these things have a technology piece. We see manufacturing that has become more automated manufacturing. I think the jobs that are going away eventually are the call center jobs. I think delivery types of jobs. I think you're going to see a change in restaurants and how food is delivered and done. Then nothing goes away completely, but the balance will change. Anybody that had trouble during COVID is changing quickly. And even though restaurants are coming back, I think the way food and restaurants and the way food is delivered is going to change dramatically. I think that there's going to be more job needs than ever as the world's population decreases. So that's just off the top of my head that I would tell you about that. I also think that some of the jobs that we see in government will change because people will expect that a lot of the things like going to court and other areas, that those things will become a lot more automated and will need less people.
We have a question from a current student. Anuja would like you to talk more about how the organization structure will evolve, how the company should structure their department and teams at workplace.
Well, I think it's going to vary by industry, but I think my opinion is it depends. It will change often. You have to keep reshuffling. And this is my issue, and this is very important, and I talk about this in my course. There's too many people that think they can solve a problem by changing structure. When we clearly looked at companies that try to be like Amazon and change the structure, they created special organizations. Most of them have failed. What we have found out, what I have coined a digital-centric mindset. The reason why the digital companies are succeeding is because they think differently. So I'm much less worried about the organizational structure than I am about the way people think and act in organizations. And if you're platform-based, structure is less important. Structure is put together dynamically to meet the needs of the individual. I know that sounds very high in the sky, but it is very important. Let me give you an example of why this is important, a recent development. Amazon was in the delivery business, first books, and then they went into just delivering things. They got so good at delivering things that they're now delivering things for other companies. And now they're frenemies with UPS and FedEx and others. What they realized, and because they had a platform, they've now created a platform of shipping. But if that shipping was embedded in a product, never happens. I hope that's an example of giving you this. Start with a platform, a cohesive platform. It's like object orientation for those of you that are technical. And then worry about what the processes are later.
And I feel compelled to read you this message. It's from one of your alums. Dr. Langer, you're a legend. Same excitement and passion as when I was a student 20 years ago. Great stuff. So my question is the future. Does that say future specialization or more generalization?
It is more generalization with the help of specialized machines. That's what you're going to have. And it's going to become more of a leadership model, and people will be able to grow much quicker because the demand will be there. And I haven't even spoken about the final frontier. Ladies and gentlemen, there will be space. Can you imagine all of the opportunities? How excited you should be. But it's all about good leadership. Remember that. Look what happened at GE with succession planning. It didn't work because what Welch did was a different environment. Think about it.
Here's another one. Do you have examples of incumbent firms that have successfully transformed to the no planning model?
I think if you should take a look at a company called Bloomberg. I've been there. I have students there. You walk into Bloomberg, which was formed in 1981, it looks like a different place. And here is a legacy organization that is dynamic. It looks like a completely different workplace than what you've seen in the past. All right? Procter & Gamble started down that road, and its leadership changed, and it never quite has recovered in the same way. But they're going to get there, because if they don't get there, they're not going to be around anymore. Okay?
Okay, another one. What are your views on performance evaluations and ratings?
I think that it has to be pushed to the manager. I think it has to be the responsibility. And if you have something to say it and stop. Look, HR has to transform itself from a regulatory body, which it needs to continue to do. All right? But also out there to do what it was supposed to do. I've met so many HR people that are dying to do this. Develop human talent. Train managers how to manage. Understand how to give good feedback and spend much more time. Look, the bottom line is if you see what the digital firms are spending on their people and their programs, it puts the legacy organizations to shame. There's more of a cost to capture global markets.
Okay, thank you. In regards to the P&E challenge that you delineated, what is your take on reverse mentoring to resolve this type of issue?
I once had a conversation with a very gifted philosopher and colleague of mine who isn't here anymore. And as many of you know, I'm an expert in the world of mentoring. And he said, Art, stop it already. It's about interacting with people, whether you call it a coach or you call it a mentoring or you call it advisement or counseling. And I think it's always two-way. But remember this, and this is more on my org psych hack training, is the person, not everybody can reverse mentor. All right? They have to be at a certain maturity level of thinking to do that. But do I think it's good? I think it's great to have feedback all the time. And if any of you think that you figured it out, you're wrong. And I'm constantly changing. I listen to my students. I don't always take their advice, but I think about it a lot. And then I go back to my colleagues and I have conversations. I had one of those today, actually. So the more you know, the more you know.
Okay. How can traditional organizations digitally transform while strengthening the core of what they have?
There's no question that I'm working with a very large Indian firm right now on this very matter. It's going to cost more money. You may have to get private equity assistance. Even GE had to do that. All right? And you've got to create legacy links. We have something in digital transformation called MVP. And I'm not talking about baseball, all right, or football. I'm talking about the most viable product. And what companies have done is they take something where they can show success as quick as possible, something that they can get done very quickly, because most people are laggards. They want to see it first, right? And then once they see it, they'll jump in with excitement. So there's a lot written on MVP. You can see it. You can search on it. It's called the most viable product. Have a short-term 6-month thing you can get done. Trust me, get people excited. You can't conquer the world overnight. That will fail. That's what GE tried to do. Couldn't do it.
Okay, so if employment is being less than permanent, how will this affect the psychology of employees and their loyalty?
I think I don't know what loyalty means anymore. What I think is if you're very good to your employee, most of them, and you have their interest in mind, they will have a loyalty to you in many ways. Now, there's always the bad boys and girls, right? That just exists. People will take advantage of you. And that's what happened in the 80s. Companies invested in education and the people would quit and they get all upset. Get out of that. All right? Don't have that expectation. I believe in a simple thing that if you are good and fair and tough when you have to be, that people appreciate that. And most people, not all, some people are just not nice. They don't come from the Bronx like me. And they will disappoint you. But I believe that most people in the long run appreciate that. And that by itself creates a longer term view. I had somebody working for me at Columbia. Many of you may know her. I told her the opportunity she had was the right thing to do. Now, maybe down the road she comes back. There's nothing wrong with that. So don't try to have all the best people. You'll never get there. IBM tried it and failed. Microsoft tried it and failed. You can't do it. Just when someone walks away, maybe you've helped them, and you'd be shocked how they may come back at the right time. That's my advice.
Another interesting question is, I'm seeing a lot of young people are technically savvy, but less responsible, and their work lacks quality. Do you think this trend will be here to stay?
We have to change at Columbia, and those of you who know me, right? And you know that you have to be critical. All right? Let them make mistakes, but be critical. And I think that most of them adjust well. But if it's too loose, then that's what you're going to get. So I think people want critical feedback. They want to be like the people they report to. They want to see people with passion. But you also have to be demanding in terms of the quality of what you expect. And if a person has to work through the night, that's okay. But if the next day they need to take a day off, I'm okay with that too. What you really want is for work to become part of your life in a balanced way.
What do you think of quantum era cybersecurity yielding the power to detect and deflect quantum era cyber attacks before they cause harm?
I am 100% on board with that. But I think there's two things going in. We don't have time. I just wrote a new book in 2020 on the next generation architecture. Quantum is key. You must know that there are many, many people who don't believe in quantum, and there are many, many, many people that do believe in quantum. What we all agree with is that it is the end of silicon. We must be able to generate much more complex keys to get into systems, and we must use AI to come up with probabilities and risk factors. No question about it. I'm working right now with a company who's a member of our center called Attack IQ, and this is exactly what they're working on.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Langer. I think we are about to close. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have a lot of discussions throughout the year, and we'll be pulling in faculty and guests from 3 other MS programs that we have at SPS. So there's information and knowledge strategy, human capital management, and negotiation and conflict resolution. So we'll conclude the series in June with these programs coming together to discuss the systemic nature of the demands of today's workplace and how they impact structures, processes, platforms, and people. So do join us and participate in these engaging discussions. We look forward to welcoming you back for our next session. But thank you, Dr. Langer, and thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you very much.
Thank all of you for putting up with me, and I'll see you around.